situation, not one of moral triumph. There are no lessons to learn if he continues to have his ego stroked by the culture of police in this state that continue to live under the protection of the blue wall of silence and a culture of killing first and refusing to ask questions later. The truth is, there is a problem with fear in the Minneapolis police, a culture of macho protectionism of their own rather than protecting the people they are supposed to serve. There will be no systemic changes if people like Noor continue to allowed to be police, handed a gun, and are out in the community taught by their superiors how to be trigger happy and get away with it. The truth is, there is no justice for Justine, not unless the police culture changes and the community is safe, not only from those elements of society that seek to harm them, but from the institution that is supposed to protect them. But that is not today. The second statement I'll read, Your Honor, is from Justine Ruszczyk, and that's Justine's brother. My sister's death, caused through the actions of Mohamed Noor, has changed my life, the lives of my family, and the lives of those who loved or knew her forever. Memories of that day, the lead up to the trial, and then of the trial itself are often the last things I think of before I sleep and the first things I think of when I awake. Every day I say to myself, every day I need to learn to live with it. Only with the love for my sister and knowledge of her kindness and compassion in my heart can I do this. I will always believe that the decision of the jury and Judge Quaintance at the end of this trial was the correct one. And I will hold that close to me as well, as that was justice for my sister. I have heard that a wishing tree has grown out of the ground near the memorial bench Don erected for her near the creek. What a wonderful thing. I wish I had my sister back. I wish for my sister to be back on this earth, for her bare feet to feel the soil and her smile to breathe the clean, fresh air. I wish for my sister and me to sit and adore blue on blue days we would cherish so much, those crystal clear days where the blue ocean would compete against the blue sky for the Serenity Award. I wish for my sister's smile and her warm hugs to be a presence in my life till we grow old and leave this earth on natural terms. I wish for her laughter to be present at family dinners. I wish Don a good life, free of pain from this trauma, and a future full of love and peace. I wish for my children to have their aunt's love and tenderness in their lives. I wish for my father and Mem had their daughter back. If I return to Minneapolis, I will visit the tree. My sister is the best person I've ever known, and I miss her terribly. Every day, she lives on in my heart and visits me with smiles in my dreams. That is my statement.
Your Honor, then that's what we have from the Ruszczyk family, and if this is the appropriate time for Mr. Damond to turn on his camera and unmute and provide his statement. Don, you can go ahead. Mr. Damond reports that he is not hearing the courtroom audio. He cannot.
Welcome to Zoom for Government. Please press 1 to join the meeting. You are in the meeting now.
Mr. Damond, can you hear us now? Mr. Damond, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. I can now hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Should I be turning on video?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Morning.
We just lost the video. We had it and then we lost it.
Looks like my camera is on.
Now it's good.
Okay. All right, good morning. I want to first acknowledge Amy Sweezy and Patrick Lofton for your hard work and sound application of the law. The decision by the Minnesota Supreme Court, in my eyes, does not diminish the truth which was uncovered during the trial. The truth is that Justine should be alive. No amount of justification, embellishment, cover-up, dishonesty, or politics will ever change that truth. I also wish to acknowledge the Honorable Judge Quaintance for applying the law and honoring Justine and our families and providing as much privacy and dignity as you legally were allowed. Thank you for those respectful actions. Please don't read into my statement that I am not still grieving the loss of Justine. I still cry so often, and I miss her so deeply. I will always love her, and I am deeply guided by her in the following statement. In this world, we see so much division, so much hatred, murder, racism, sexism, black and white thinking, which only separates us as humans. In Justine's life, she was a unifier, not a separator. She lived with the highest level of morality of anyone I had the privilege of knowing. She stood for justice. She lived to transform people. She lived a life of love. She modeled a life of joy for all, and she stood for forgiveness. I watched as she generously forgave others for their injustices and poor behavior. She taught me and others that all people have value. She taught that all people deserve mercy and that all people can transform. And I have no doubt she would have forgiven you, Mohamed, for your inability to manage your own emotions that night, which resulted in you pulling that trigger. Justine was and is still my greatest teacher. Given her example, I want you to know that I forgive you, Mohamed. All I ask is that you use this experience to do good for other people. Be the example of how to transform beyond adversity. Be an example of honesty and contrition. This is what Justine would want. The greatest amends we can ever make is to change our behavior for the better. We can never undo the past. But our work is to heal by demonstrating we can truly change and do good for others. This is Justine's example in life. And now, even in death, she shows us how to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Damond. At this time, I will hear from the parties regarding disposition in this matter. And we can start with the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. One of the things that I've had to explain to the Damonds and Ruszczyk and Justine's family over the last several weeks is exactly where we are and what the options are that are available to the court. And I'll tell you what I told them, and it's also for the benefit of the other spectators here in the courtroom, because I think there's a significant amount of confusion about what happens in a situation like this, which doesn't happen very often. But for those of us who know Minnesota sentencing law, it's pretty easy to see what the options are here for the court. But what they allow and what the Minnesota sentencing guidelines allow for a sentence for Mr. Noor are a range of months between 41 and 57. And in our line of work, we speak about the top of the box and the bottom of the box and the middle of the box. And none of that matters when you're a family of someone who's lost someone. But what I have explained to the family and what they understand and what you heard in the statements is that what they ask for and what we ask for, what Mr. Lofton and I ask for, is the sentence at what we call the top of the box, the 57 months. And this court can give a sentence between 41 months and 57 months without any explanation here today. There's no findings that need to be made. Any one of those numbers in between is within the discretion that's given to this court as the sentencing court, which is something that this court has that the appellate courts did not have. The sentencing decision is uniquely up to this court. And although I suspect the court, when it pronounces its sentence, will give reasons for doing it, you don't have to. Because any sentence that you give here today will be a guideline sentence. And the fact is that some numbers are less than others, and I know that Mr. Plunkett is going to ask you for a lower number, and we're asking for the higher one. Our reasons for asking for the number of 57 months and for that sentence, we believe that are several. One of them is that this case now stands alone among manslaughter cases in the state of Minnesota, second-degree manslaughter cases in Minnesota, on its facts. This will be the only time that a police officer has been sentenced for a crime under this offense in the state of Minnesota. And also, for those of us who practice in the area, we refer to things that are worse than typical or more serious than typical. which is always awkward when you're talking about the loss of a human life in a serious criminal offense. But nonetheless, that's how we do our work. And by every measure, the facts of this case, what the jury heard, what was decided by the jury, is worse than typical for a second-degree manslaughter case, all of which are very, very serious. One of the reasons that this case is more serious than others is because of the fact of who the defendant was at the time. He wore the badge of a Minneapolis police officer voluntarily and by his own statement with pride. That was something that he wanted to do, a job that he chose. And we learned during the trial, particularly from Chief Tim Longo from the University of Virginia, we learned about the social contract that exists when someone puts on that badge and what they have agreed to do. And that social contract provides to officers a privilege and rights to use deadly force to protect other civilians. And that is a privilege afforded to no other member of society in the United States. And the defendant had that privilege. The other side of that social contract belongs to the citizens. The citizens agree not to take matters into their own hands, and that when they see something dangerous or when they need help, that they will reach out to the police to get the help that they need. And we exist side by side that way. We have officers who carry guns, and we trust that they will be used only when necessary to protect other people from harm. In Ms. Ruszczyk's case, she was acting perfectly consistent with everything we know about her character, not even for herself when she called 911. She was calling to protect a third party, a woman in the alley who was suffering some kind of harm. She followed through with her end of the deal. She called 911 a second time. She went out to greet the police. She went out to tell them what she knew to try to help. And it was the defendant who breached that social contract. Instead of using his authority and his power to protect, to investigate, to prevent further harm, he pulled that weapon and used it in a misguided belief of his own defense. This case stands unique on its facts for that. And for that, the most serious sentence this court can impose is required. I'd like to speak also today about what we heard at trial. And this court's sentencing decision needs to be based on what we heard back in 2019, 2.5 years ago when we tried this case, about the events that occurred 2 years before that in 2017. And Your Honor, the evidence that you heard and what was proven here, and it's important to mention, I think, that the jury's verdict on the third-degree murder count, for the Supreme Court to have reversed that, required them to overrule the precedent expressly on which the charging decision in this case, on which this court's pretrial, during trial, and post-trial motions rested, and the law on which the Minnesota Court of Appeals made its decision. Nothing can be done about that, but it doesn't change the fact that this jury told us that what Mohamed Noor did was worse than second-degree manslaughter. They had a choice between both, and they found him guilty of that, of both. From that, we should draw a strong conclusion that the members of this community found Mr. Noor's conduct to be extremely, extremely serious. I would point out also that while Mr. Noor may have conceded his guilt on this offense of second-degree manslaughter to the reviewing courts, to both the Minnesota Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, he did not do that at trial. What he did was mount, which he is perfectly entitled to do, an extremely vigorous and aggressive defense, pointing out a number of things that I would consider that we have called the sort of yes, but things. Things that meant to shift responsibility to Ms. Ruszczyk for her own death. Things like, yes, but Ms. Ruszczyk should have stayed in the house and listened to her fiance who told her to go outside. Ms. Ruszczyk had skills as a person who practiced yoga that allowed her to sneak up on the car, thus causing some kind of unbelievable fear in the part of the defendant and his partner. The fact that what was expressly found by the Minnesota Supreme Court, as a matter of fact, that they credited what happened at this trial with the belief that Ms. Ruszczyk never slapped that SWAT car, that actually was disproven at trial, and that she did nothing to bring about the circumstances of her own death. And this court sending a message through the sentence of that will go a long way to recognizing who is responsible for this and who isn't. I want to also recognize publicly the Ruszczyk families and Don Damon's family, and I want to thank them publicly. This has been an incredibly long 4-year journey for them. They have been, all victim families, particularly in homicides, carry a unique burden in our society, and they have to put their trust in a government institution for the resolution of their cases. And even in a case like this, which brought about, extreme distrust in the system, the Ruszczyks and Mr. Damond and his family have stepped up every time and done everything we asked them to. And it has been my observation that they have really tried to convey to this court the importance of this, but also a larger view of what this case meant, not only in Minneapolis, but elsewhere in the country. And I think it's important that they know how much Mr. Lofton and our team appreciate that. And they're continuing to stick with us when many other people would have had every reason not to. So, Your Honor, those are the reasons that we would ask you to sentence, obviously within the Minnesota sentencing guidelines, but a sentence of 57 months, which at this point is the way that the court is able to use its discretion and its power to recognize this and ensure that justice is served in the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sweezy. Mr. Plunkett?
Thank you and good morning, Your Honor. July 15th, 2017. The Twin Cities has seen so many adjustments since the day of the events that bring us together unfolded. On July 15th, 2017, so many lives changed in a blink of an eye. 2 young officers, both early in their careers, both overreacted, and Mr. Noor's overreaction caused the tragic death of Ms. Ruszczyk. This perfect storm came and went in under a second. We are now here to sentence Mr. Noor because his mistake constitutes a culpably negligent act. In considering the right sentence, we respectfully ask this court to consider who Mr. Noor is beyond the act he committed that led to the death of a wonderful person. From the earliest moments of this case, there has been tremendous focus on who Ms. Ruszczyk was, her unfailing kindness to animals, to children, and to all people, all of it very true, and adding to the depth of this tragedy. Another aspect of the tragedy of this case is the similar goodness that inheres in Mr. Noor. Both of these people took a similar and profound interest in those around them. They wanted to make the world a better place for others. Throughout his life and up to this very day, Mr. Noor has worked with one measure of personal achievement. And that measure is how he has helped the people around him. Even when he shot and killed Ms. Ruszczyk through culpable negligence, he was operating with a mistaken belief that he needed to protect his partner. A horrible mistake, to be sure, but not an act motivated by cruelty or distaste for human life. Mr. Noor chose a career in police work to bridge the frayed relationship between the police, the justice system, and the Somali immigrant community. His was not an obvious career choice for a college-educated man with so many options before him. He just wanted to help his community, to help the citizens of Minneapolis. Having come from nothing, having arrived in America with so little, only the clothes on his back and a suitcase in his hand, he had now received so much that he had to give back. Mr. Noor grew up watching his father work hard, and he'd seen his father's work be rewarded with a chance in America. The chance to allow his family to prosper, the chance to be educated, the chance to succeed, and all in exchange for perseverance and hard work. Seeing that, Mr. Noor wanted to give back and repay the opportunities he and his whole family have received. Mr. Noor has two matters that are most important to him: family and community. This is witnessed by his conduct while incarcerated. He worked to make his prison a better place. He wasn't simply a model prisoner, he was an award-winning prisoner. He was selected to receive the Prisoner's September 11th Worker Award, recognizing Mr. Noor's commitment to his job and respect for others. Your Honor, we are respectfully asking this court to impose a sentence at the low end of the guideline range. We understand that this would be a different approach than the court took in 2019, but we are here for sentencing in a different time. And there can be little doubt that Mr. Noor's time in incarceration has been more punitive than anyone could have imagined before the pandemic. That sentence will sanction Mr. Noor for his tragic mistake, recognize his dedication to the community, account for the harshness of his incarceration, and make a step toward restoring trust in our justice system to the Somali community. That sentence can be justice. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further from either side?
Your Honor, at this time, Mr. Noor would like to address the court.
Your Honor, I just want to say that I'm deeply grateful for Mr. Damon's forgiveness. I'm deeply sorry for the pain that I've caused that family, and I will take his advice and be a unifier. Thank you.
The court want us to be seated.
You may remain where you are. Mr. Noor, I last saw you on July 7th, 2019, 2 years, 3.5 months ago, and certainly much has changed in the world since then. But I need to read a portion of what I said on that day, because the jurors in this case, citizens of Minneapolis, raised questions then that remain unanswered. On July 7th, I said, the primary concern of the jurors who heard the testimony in this case when I spoke with them after the verdict was, will there be changes? Change is needed. Will some of these supervising officers be fired or disciplined? Is what we saw normal for the Minneapolis Police Department and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension? How will this be prevented from happening again? Why are officers more concerned about their personal safety than the safety of the public, especially in such a low-crime neighborhood? Why should a civilian have to be afraid of approaching a squad car? What about the motto on the car door, to serve with compassion? Why were Mr. Noor and Mr. Harity so reactive? What was their training? The jurors in this case were particularly concerned with Officer Harity's statement that his priority was making sure he did whatever he had to get home safe each night. Jurors remarked that they thought the priority of the police was supposed to be to protect and serve the public. No one who heard the testimony in this case or who works in the criminal justice system can question the difficulty of a patrol officer's job or the dedication of the majority of the police and first responders. But here, something went very much awry. The victim's family and some of the witnesses, including some officers, have expressed concerns. A large amount of taxpayer dollars will go to Australia, but Minneapolis residents await the promised transformation, and the questions of the jurors remain unanswered. What has changed? What will change so that this does not happen again? How does the department address officer safety without jeopardizing public safety? The jurors and the people of Minneapolis need and deserve answers. The citizens of Minneapolis have now paid out $47 million in settlements for allegations of police negligence and malfeasance. Since we last met, another person has died at the hands of police after two other rookies responded together in a squad to a low-risk situation which escalated. The community exploded. Another police officer has been on trial for murder. Mr. Noor, I am not surprised that you have been a model prisoner. However, I do not know of any authority that would make that grounds for reducing your sentence. There was no departure motion in this case by either side, and so no departure from the guidelines is appropriate or legal. You have been convicted of manslaughter in the second degree, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk of harm. As Ms. Sweezy said, the court may sentence you to between 41 months and 57 months. That is the range. You did shoot across the nose of your partner. You did endanger a bicyclist and residents of a community of surrounding houses on a summer Saturday evening. One household was entertaining guests on a porch adjacent to the gunfire. These factors of endangering the public make your crime of manslaughter appropriate for high end of the guideline spots. I hereby sentence you to the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 57 months. You will receive credit for the 908 days you have spent in custody. You have previously submitted DNA to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension back in July of 2017. I hereby remand you to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. Good luck, sir. Thank you all.
Goodbye.